Hello and welcome back to the Double M Radio Gamescast. Look, all of us were dancing in the background, but you couldn't see it because we were on the start screen. So, as always,
and all of
I'm
it was
your
probably
host.
offbeat.
Yeah, all of it was off beef. Beef, not beef.
We're off
important
beef.
distinction. I wish we were off
We
beef.
beefing? We all beefing right now?
As always, I am your host, Ryan, and I'm joined by my lovely cohort of co-hosts, Wyatt,
Hi.
Brett,
Hello.
and Alex.
Hello.
They're all here. We did it. We've successfully had a show where we're in stable places and things will hopefully not go wrong.
We'll see
Like
about
power
that.
going out.
Thanks
Yep.
for jinxing us, Ryan.
All right. So that means we got a show to start. And this is the first week in a while where we don't have E3 or random shenanigans related to E3 to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
That said, we do still kind of have some E3 related shenanigans to talk about, but it's not going to be the majority of the show. How's everyone's week been? How's the wind down from E3 been? Are people still feeling good about E3? Are they feeling let down? Overall, how is your week later feeling about E3?
Almost completely forgot about it. Almost completely forgot about it. Who's Jeff Keighley again?
Who's Jeff Keighley again?
How
Great.
dare you? If you don't remember Jeff Keighley, that means you don't remember his sick kicks, and that just is offensive. Honestly, that's the worst thing ever.
I'm not a fan of Converse style shoes, Wyatt.
I don't think they were Converse style shoes. to be
Anyone
honest
at a
with you.
game conference has only ever worn Converse style shoes.
That's what makes him
Jeff
so
Keighley
special is that he
didn't.
doesn't wear them.
All right, simmer down, children. We have things to talk about. Brett, did you have anything to say on your E3 experiences?
I'm still waiting to hear anything from Sony because it seems like they're doing the thing where we're not going to do E3 because instead we're going to do.
Our thing, which is nothing right now.
Wouldn't you like
Yeah.
to know?
Speaking
Nintendo
of,
Just
Direct.
don't say anything.
I mean, not that.
speaking of Sony, we have rumors that there will be a Sony PlayStation whatever event, PSX, whatever they're gonna call it, happening sometime in the next week, just randomly. That's a rumor that's kind of floating around right now, which is a little odd because it seems very unlikely that we're gonna get a surprise drop of that in the next week.
What a
with
great
no
way to get viewers.
announcement. The other rumor that came after that is that they moved it back because it got leaked. So
Mhm.
we don't know when that event's
That's
going to
so Eddie, give me the game information.
be.
Well, this is
we, of course, don't
also
even know if
both
that's
of
true.
these rumors. Both of these rumors are happening after the first rumor, which is that it was going to happen at the end of June.
Yes.
And then it didn't.
Yep.
So I think it's like one of those oh, the end of the world is happening this year, and then it doesn't happen, and they go, it's next year now, and they just keep pushing it back.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like. It's never going to happen.
Definitely. So there's a chance we get a Sony thing at some random point. We will try to do a reaction if any of us are in an area we can do it, but because they don't give any notice to these things, we can't say we will because we have no notice. So if we are given the time ahead of time, we'll do something about that. But if not, we don't really have any ways to do anything about it. Same goes for the EA Play event that's happening. I think we do have a time for that, but I highly doubt any of us care enough to.
No.
I did hear that BioWare basically isn't showing off anything.
And that's what killed my interest in it. I'm like, all right,
Yeah.
I don't. All right, EA, just show me whatever else you got. I don't think Skate is going to be there because the Skate game was just announced as being in production, so it's probably not ready yet. BioWare is not going to be there. Like, what is EA going to show that is going to change my opinion of them? They've already shown Battlefield, so
Yeah.
I don't know what else they could.
Maybe they'll pull out something that Respawn is working on that would perk my interest, but
Possible because they do have the Star Wars. They still have Star Wars licenses. Jedi Fallen Order 2 is definitely happening at some point, presumably.
Mhm.
So
They
that
got
could
the,
happen.
the
Titanfall
Dead
3,
Space, the Dead
Titanfall.
Space rumors as well.
Oh, that's correct. That's right.
True.
Mhm.
So yeah, we'll see
But just
what
rumors.
information they announce before that happens. End of this month. So we've got some other announcements from this week. Thankfully, not very E3 related, which is Ghost of Tsushima, a little game that many of us enjoyed, is getting a standalone expansion type thing. called Ikishima, which is going to be coming in the director's cut edition of the game. Now, I think we all agree more Tsushima is a good thing. What I'm curious if we all think is the $30 price tag for the PS5 version, if you already own the PS4 version, a good thing? Considering it is $20 to upgrade on PS4.
As a wise man once said, "Mo money, mo problems," and that's the end of my argument.
Great.
Well, I think it really just depends on how substantial the new piece of content is.
And
to
the
be honest with
PS5
you. It
features.
kind of- yeah, it really all comes down to
Like,
that.
I don't
it's hard to
mind
say-
paying $20 for an expansion, because like I play MMOs, I play the old school Oblivion and whatnot, where you had to pay like $20 for an expansion, and so long as it's substantial, I think that's fine. It's more the question of, is the added $10 price tag for the PS5 upgrade gonna be something that is substantial enough to warrant that price tag? Like, are they putting enough effort into this upgrade?
I mean, that question, you could expand that question out to, should games be $70 on PS5 at all? Because we're seeing like a $10 increase in price, like, in more than just DLC, obviously.
With weird
So
selections of games too. We've talked about it a little bit before. It kind of seems like the games that have been $70 were games that maybe shouldn't have been.
Yeah.
And some of the games that aren't are the games that kind of could have been. So,
yeah,
interesting split. But that's its own separate topic that I'm sure we'll have a lot to say about that as more games come out for the PS5 and Xbox Series X, and whether or not both end up going for that $70 price tag or not.
Yeah.
All right. So, Housemarque, the game they made recently, Returnal, was selling super well. They are now officially a PlayStation studio. Now, to be honest,
for them?
I did not know they weren't.
Yep.
I just assumed they were.
I mean, I think because I know that Resogun was a PS4 only launch title, and then I think everything they've made in between Resogun and Returnal were
Was
multi-platform.
yeah.
So, but I mean, I didn't know that until I really thought about it. I was like, oh yeah, I guess their other stuff wasn't PlayStation only, but
yeah. Interesting acquisition. I think we were all fans of Returnal to some degree. So definitely cool to see PlayStation Studios getting more developers that are in like very different genres. Because PlayStation's traditionally had like a lot of third-person open world RPGs and that kind of thing, but not a lot of other
like just
stuff.
Very like just more linear, like narrative focused stuff. So it's nice to see that they're widening their
umbrella
catalog a little bit for sure.
Definitely gonna be pretty interesting to see what they come out with going forward. Another PlayStation Studio thing that happened is PlayStation Japan Studio has seemingly dissolved and been kind of reshifted around within PlayStation Studios. This is kind of a thing that I think we've had brief bits of news on over a long time. A bunch of people left Japan Studios last year, but that could have just been easily tossed off as people moving to different projects. But now it looks like if you go to the PlayStation Studios website, Japan Studios is no longer in that list. So seemingly they have been dissolved since they were an internal PlayStation Studio.
What did they work on? Was it more like support for other projects?
They did a lot of stuff. They did Last Guardian, Shadow of the Colossus, Eco.
Oh, okay.
They're a studio that has been very big for a long time, but of course, like The Last Guardian took like 10 years to come out.
Yeah,
so
and its reception was pretty. Its reception was pretty lukewarm as well. I don't think it probably was as successful as they wanted it to be.
I think the critical reception was good. It's just like that's the kind of game that doesn't sell consoles, doesn't really push itself that hard to be this big thing for the sales of the console. So I don't think it was successful enough to warrant keeping it. And it seems like many of the developers that were there, if they haven't left, have been reshuffled to Asobi, which is the studio that worked on Astro's Playroom and the newer Astro thing, which I think is great because Astro's PS5 like demo thing is really fun.
Yeah,
it's essentially just an entire game, really.
It's short, but it's such a solid little platformer that you get for free. And I mean, this happened just today, actually. I went over to a friend's house and he was like, hey, like, let's check out PS5 stuff. So I literally just brought my PS5 over. And the first thing I did was showed him Astro's Playroom because that's like when they want to look at a PS5, they want to see how the controller works. So you just have them play that, and it gives them a
Definitely.
good. It's a nice like party trick, I guess. It's like a hey, check this out sort of thing, and it's really good at that.
Even outside of that, it's just a
sure.
well-made short platformer, and we don't get a lot of those. It's basically just Nintendo and a couple of indie studios that do platformers like that now.
Yeah.
So I think it would be really interesting if we do get like a major, highly funded Astro-style game from the Astro devs. I would love that.
And it's also that entire series has so much charm too. Like, I had a big stupid grin on my face when I was playing that for the first time because they're just so cute and charming. There's so much character put into it while you're playing.
Absolutely. All right. In slightly less fun news, Guilty Gear Strive has come out and had a lot of success as a new fighting game. It's something I've been playing a lot. It's very fun. But they have just removed all references of Uyghur, Tibet, and Taiwan from the game's backstory. I mean,
Okay.
Come on. That's kind of my only.
Yeah.
Anything starting with the letter T and has a shape in the name?
All right. Look, I think that this is where there's like a legitimate discussion had about whether or not things like this should ever happen in reference to like changing the story of a game because a certain country doesn't like that other countries are represented in that game. Because like this is obviously a thing related to the Chinese market and whatnot. I think it was blocking some form of the release in China is probably some conditional thing. It still kind of is just weird. Like it's the kind of thing that you're like, why is this a big enough deal to warrant censorship?
Money. That's the big
Gotta
deal.
get those sales, yeah.
I mean, it's part of
Every
the
last
Chinese
one.
market is such a huge market for video games that it's hard to say that this was a bad decision, but at the same time, it's clearly like this is what censorship was going to look like in modern
But
games.
they couldn't just censor it for those like territories though. It's like a whole like
the entire
does-
game,
like,
no mention of those countries anymore.
because I mean, there's a lot of like country specific censorship that doesn't apply to like other versions of the game. So I wonder why that wasn't done, and it was more like
I'm betting
Yeah, like
some
how
technical reason if they weren't.
Australia or
able to.
Germany handles its stuff.
that's kind of what I was thinking of.
It is very interesting. I just think it's the kind of thing that this is going to become more clear as we move into the future what ends up happening with a lot of these situations in games, especially because like these weren't that important in the Strive backstory. So it seems like such a high effort move to go in and remove these things that weren't even a big part of the game to begin with. But you know, it's the kind of thing that's going to end up happening. So it kind of sucks. All right.
Wonderful world.
We had a whole fiasco with VR headset ads recently. I don't know if any of you guys have
Did
been
we?
following this.
Ads
So-
about them or ads like
In them.
microtransaction thingies in the
So Facebook
God.
wanted to start doing ads in the Oculus headset family. They had gotten a startup game for this, and I don't want to badmouth the game, so I'm not going to say the name of it. But basically a not free game had said that they would be the test run for this new ad system. There was so much immediate backlash that a few days later, that same game backed out of
Good.
being the test run for those ads. Now they redirected it to their free game that they have, so it's not. Still, we might get some ads in VR headsets, but at least for now, the backlash against them being in a paid product was so high that they had to back out of this. And it wasn't like Facebook backing out; it was the devs themselves of this game were like, "No, we've realized that this is not something we can do."
Even
and
so,
keep a player
having an
base.
ad that is almost always a solid pop-up window in something like VR is
So
a horrible
obnoxious.
idea.
I cannot imagine how, like, especially if you get like motion sickness or something that pops up randomly
Oh
just
yeah.
in your face.
That would make that game unplayable.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing that I think like this seems like some high up person at Facebook is going, we need to have as many revenue streams as possible from VR, and they're thinking, oh, we're just going to use ads. That's what we always default to for this type of thing. And I don't think it's going to work because of the fact that if you really start putting ads this heavily into your thing, competitors are going to start pushing their own things out that might be a little bit worse, but maybe they don't have ads, and that matters a lot to some people. Especially if it's becoming a recurring issue of like you're getting ads playing your game. Imagine if you play like a multiplayer game and after every match you have to watch like a 30-second ad that you like have to look at with your head to watch it and go
your
through.
only option is to close your eyes and you still have headphones on or something.
Even then,
So
some headsets have eye tracking. So we are so
What's
close.
really
It should be criminal.
What's really frustrating as well is I feel like, because I've said for a long time that like VR headsets, there's such a high bar to entry, both in terms of like the space required, the setup required, the money required, and it's always felt like the Oculus Quest 2 specifically was such a like nice middle ground of like it's not too expensive and it's not too much of a hassle to set up. Like it kind of found a good balance there. It seems like I've used it a couple times. It seems like a pretty good like solid product as far as like a VR headset goes.
Absolutely.
And so it really sucks that they keep having to, because this isn't the first time Facebook has tried to pull stuff like this before.
Absolutely.
Like I remember,
yeah.
I remember the whole thing where you had to link your Facebook account to use it, but that was a whole thing as well. So it sucks because it seems like a really good, like in terms of the whole like hardware for VR headsets, it seems like that's like probably the best middle ground you could get. Like it seems like a good balance, and they just keep messing with it, which is a shame.
Yeah. Okay. So moving on, there's one interesting thing that I think the games industry as a whole has been moving towards, which is live service as this model for a lot of AAA games, and especially multiplayer games. So I was looking down my little game news feed, and this morning I saw like a highly like front page headline. And I looked at it and I was like, this is not news. This isn't something I would expect to see news. That headline is that NetherRealm, the makers of Mortal Kombat 11, are ending the game's DLC cycle. For reference, Mortal Kombat 11's been going for like 2 years. Fighting games used to never have that long of a post-launch life cycle of DLC and whatnot, unless it was like a Japanese fighter in arcades. You wouldn't really get that. Now, I am curious why this is a headline. I think this is part of the live service push, is that people are starting to come to expect it from games, and especially games that have like microtransactions and whatnot in them, that it's going to be this continuous support and it's not going to end eventually.
Well, you said that they were. You said they. I forget your exact terminology, but it sounded like, did they have more DLC that they were supposed to be rolling out?
Nope.
Oh.
There's nothing. All the characters came out. All the stuff they'd said that was going to come out came out, and they're just like, "Well, we're done," and it got put to the front of this like news page of Wide Games Industry News. And I'm just like, why is this such important news now that we need to have this headline and be like, it's okay for a game studio to move on to work on their next project? I'm just like, this is such an interesting headline because to me it is just indicative of an odd attitude towards game development that kind of exists now in a lot of developers, of this attitude of like, well, we need to keep moving on with our games and like keep making content, where in reality that's really like not something that needs to happen.
No. That's so weird. I don't know, that like definitely does not need to be. I don't think any of us even like. I feel like there just comes a certain point in any of the games that we play that have like live service where it just feels the same as like, okay, the map pack came out, the DLC came out. This is the around like whatever the fourth or fifth one. This is how many they did for the last game. Okay, I guess this is the last one. It's been a year and a half or 2 years. Cool.
Yeah.
I will continue to play the game anyway.
And
it's just so weird that has to be made into a big deal because it's just not at all.
I think there is a situation where a game, like if it has some sort of live service model and it says it's ending, I think there is a situation where that would actually would be news. Is because it seems like with Mortal Kombat. Now I haven't really played it, but from what I understand, when they're talking about like post-launch support, they're just talking about adding content in terms of like characters and
DLC. It's classic DLC that you would see in games.
But there are games that radically change the way they play because of their live service. So I've been playing a lot of Sea of Thieves recently, and that game doesn't just add content, it adds new mechanics. It changes the way ship combat works. It changes a lot of the fundamentals of the game. itself. And so if Sea of
I
Thieves
think
were to
with
come
that it would
out,
be a good example.
no, and that's what I'm saying. So like if Sea of Thieves were to come and say, okay, we're not adding any more content in terms of like we're not adding any changes to like the core mechanics or anything. We're not changing the main gameplay loop at all. That would be more significant because it's literally changing the way the game is made and not just adding more, cosmetics to it.
Yeah.
So in that situation,
I mean,
it makes more sense.
I agree with you. I think that the only genre that I really think an announcement like this being so high up for would work is an MMO of like if World of Warcraft decides that they're going down and they say, okay, World of Warcraft we're not going to add any more expansions, no more content. Maybe we'll keep the servers up, but we're not adding any more content after this next expansion.
That would be huge.
That's news. That's like big news.
Yeah.
Well,
especially because that game's been around since what 2000, early 2000s,
2002
right?
or something like
that.
super old.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's big news. But at the same time, like Mortal Kombat, there's 11 of those games.
Not including
there's going to be a 12th.
Not including the spin-off games either.
Exactly. So yeah, I think this is just it's a super weird piece of news that I saw this morning. It was like, why is this here? Okay, so I don't know if any of you three are familiar with a streamer and YouTuber by the name of Asmongold.
Yes, I think I've seen him.
I've heard his name.
I think I've seen like a Rage compilation.
Yeah, so he is one of the most like popular Twitch streamers ever. He's the kind of person that gets like consistently 150 to 200K viewers, which is bonkers amounts of people. So he started recently a game called Final Fantasy XIV, which was notable because he's a big WoW streamer. That was his big game. The thing that I want to call out about this is that I tuned into his stream like for a few minutes the day he started it. And this is something I think MMOs often don't know how to deal with, is how do you prevent griefing in an MMO where you have like large mounts? Because this is something that I noticed. There was like thousands of people following him around, of course, because he's a huge streamer and the game is a free trial. But there are also like people that have been playing the game for a long time and decided to follow him. And we're on like these massive, like the biggest mounts in the game, and would just try to block his entire screen everywhere he went. So he could not play the game.
That is so annoying.
And then there were players that were swarming around, and they would go around and kill all the monsters in the zone he was in, so he could not do any quests.
That's so stupid.
That's so dumb.
This is the reason I want to bring this up is I'm like, this is such a. You have to be dedicated to do this, right? You have to be there for the entire stream doing this of like 8+ hours.
You have to have nothing better to do with your time than to mess with a Twitch streamer. Like you really don't have anything productive.
Who feels the need to bully a streamer?
And it's like, I get it. Asmongold can be a bit of a. I don't personally watch a lot of him, so I'm not up with any drama, but I know he's not the most non-controversial of streamers. He does tend to because he does a lot of like rage content. He tends to get people riled up.
I don't know him that well either, but I've picked up on the fact that he is not a very level-headed guy most of the time.
It's a character, right? It's like Dr. Disrespect, where it's a character. Sure. And I think that's where a lot of people get mixed up, is they don't realize that like the streamer is putting on a show, right? They're not just playing a game. And the same thing can be seen, like he has a separate side channel where he streams other games and whatnot, where he doesn't do the character, and he's much more of a calm, like level-headed person who just sits down and like chills out and plays a game. Right. I think it's the reason that he has 200K viewers is because he does that persona. So I think that streamer persona is why it's just so interesting to see that people get so invested in this as to for like 10 hours. And like, because I went in the stream at like 10 a.m. in the morning when he started, and I went back at like 8 o'clock at night when he was ending. The same thing was happening the entire time. Of these people just following him around and like ruining his ability to play the game, which was bonkers. Like, I'm just like, this is such a level of degeneracy in a video game that I haven't seen in so long.
It's a good word for it.
It was incredible. It's so bizarre. But the reason I bring it up is then immediately was followed up by a bunch of those players have now received bans from Final Fantasy. And the thing that is important about this is many of those players who were following him around had what are called like relic weapons and super advanced mounts, which need you to play the game for like thousands of hours to get. Hundreds to thousands of hours. So these people just lost a lot of time. And I'm like, why would you put your game at risk to do
Maybe
this.
don't bully someone if you spent over 1,000 hours grinding out an epic weapon in a game.
Yeah, especially because the 14 as an MMO tends to be pretty laid back and relaxed compared to WoW. Like, people are very friendly usually. So seeing this happen and then people just like throw their accounts away essentially for this ability to like mess with a streamer for one day is ridiculous. I just thought this was an insane like thing that happened to where he just couldn't play the game for like a full day. It was bizarre. That's been the highlight of I think Twitch the last few days, because you can go on the front page and like literally every single front page person is someone talking about Asmongold for a little while. So now we're in there too.
Oh,
Wow.
God.
Right.
riding the wave.
Right in the wave. It's also, look, we briefly talk about him so I can put his name in the description, and that way the YouTube algorithm likes us.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh,
There's the
actually,
tactics.
no, I think there was like a 3-hour video of his stream up on YouTube or something.
Yeah,
That's
you
where
can
it
watch
was
like a minute of that, and you can see players just swarming him constantly. It's insane. Super bizarre. It's the kind of thing that's crazy. Of course, him streaming the game also means FF14 just broke their concurrent player number by like a significant amount because of so many people trying it out for the first time. So it's still like a good thing for the game, obviously, that a streamer with this many people is playing the game, because a lot of them are trying it out, and that means games get more players, which is always great. All right, we're going to talk about games not getting more players. We're going to talk about games losing players. All right.
over
the topic-
time or suddenly.
That's up to you. That's up to you completely. So this episode is about what makes you quit a game. What are what are the things you find annoying enough that ruin a game that you might otherwise be really enjoying? Or say you're really enjoying a game that's a live service game and they release an update that kills it for you. Like, what are the things that happen that make you stop playing a game that you would otherwise enjoy? Or are there things that are like black flags to you that really just makes it so you don't enjoy the game at all?
This would be, so what you're talking about is not necessarily things where you were enjoying the game at first and then something happened, like an update or something you discovered.
No, that
in
fits.
a-
Yeah, that fits.
Whatever
And
makes you
anything-
stop playing a game that you
Anything
started.
that makes you stop. The only thing is I want to talk about games that like are enjoyable to some degree, because like I think it's obvious
yeah.
why we all stopped playing Anthem. We don't need to talk about games that are just awful.
The baseline is that it has to be ruined, and that implies that it had to have been enjoyable at
Yeah.
the
So-
start when you started
so-
playing.
How much of this episode do we want to dedicate to talking about Destiny then?
We'll
That's
limit it
the
to a
question.
third, but I'm gonna leave a significant amount of time to talk about Destiny, because I think we all have things to say about Destiny
I
specifically.
spent 40 minutes today trying to solo flawless something on my
Ooh.
Warlock, which is the worst mistake I could have ever made. Because even
Good.
though it's like one of Destiny's flagship classes, I started on Hunter, which was also the worst mistake, the worst choice I could have done, because it makes learning all the other classes so much harder. And I'm already getting into Destiny. Let's please change the
All
subject.
right. So, before we go hardcore into Destiny, we're gonna play a game. So let's say each of you imagine your perfect game. This game has come out. It is so perfect for you. You're playing it. You're enjoying it. It's something you feel like you can spend 1,000 hours in this game.
Ryan, we have the Transformers game. We're good. We're set.
All right. So this Transformers game has just come out. Whatever your perfect game is, I'm gonna start saying some things that get added in updates, and I want you to tell me when you would stop playing. What would make you stop playing? What is the update that would break you?
Not
Okay.
our baby, Ryan.
It doesn't have to be the Transformers game. Just assume it's your favorite live service game. That it could be Babylon's Fall. It can be whatever game is coming out that's going to be ruined by updates. Okay, so game comes out. Everyone's having a great time. It's super happy. Players are loving it. All right, week 2. There's an update that comes out that adds microtransactions to the game. Cosmetic only. But there's microtransactions in the game now. All right. Now, Wyatt, I know you're not out because you play Deep Rock Galactic. So,
Oof.
That's exactly the game I was thinking of, but that doesn't have. Wait.
this does.
Yes, it does.
That's
It
the
does.
thing. Did they say that it was going to have these, or did they just say that it wasn't and then add them? Because those are the
Let's
two
say they never
options
made a
that have
claim.
happened.
They never claimed it would or wouldn't have them.
So
For any of these.
Shadow
Yeah.
dropped.
You could say that they like announce it a week in advance or whatever, but they're not being devious, right? They're not hiding these updates from happening. At least not yet.
I'm still in.
You're still in? All right. Cosmetic
I'm still in.
microtransactions. You still get cool cosmetics in the game. It's all fine. Next update comes out. They add a DLC character. Okay, DLC character class for this game. Is anyone out at DLC character class?
Depends.
This is still normal.
I'm still in, but it's also very dependent on the game. Like if it's PvE and PvP, and everyone is playing that new character or that new class, and it's completely overpowered and just it's the meta. And
Okay.
if you play anything else, you're not playing the game.
Now let's say a couple weeks after that, they take this character class they've just added to this game. They add a way to earn it with in-game currency, except it's bonkers high amounts. Like this would ruin the coffers of anyone playing this game for a long amount of time. And they raise the price of the DLC. $2.
That's stinky. It wouldn't make me stop, but I would be like,
This is where you're getting concerned.
That's low.
Worried.
Yeah.
This is when I start looking elsewhere.
I'm starting to see the red flags here.
Are you naming the exact thing that has happened for a certain game, Ryan?
All of these are things that have happened for games.
Or
none of these are
certain game in particular.
These are from different games. I'm not just going for one specific game. I'm kind of going for live service in general. All right, so we have new character. Now, next update comes. You're all enjoying your game. They add a new area. A new area for you to go play. Maybe if it's a multiplayer game, it's a new map. If it's single player, it's a new zone for you to go enjoy. This area releases and costs real money with no way to obtain it in game. Let's say you buy this area, assuming it's a regular DLC. You get to this area, and you enjoy yourself for like a few days. Is anyone out aside from Wyatt at this point?
I'm still in.
So is it just an area, or is there content in the area?
Well, I would assume there's content.
It seems like there's content in the area at the start. All right,
Okay,
this is where we're pulling out the live service. So this area comes out.
I don't know if I'd get it, but I'd still be playing the game.
A little bit afterwards, they apologize for there not being enough content in the area, and they pledge they're going to add more content to the area. Now, 2 weeks later, they release more content for the area, but they charge you an additional $5 for said content.
Nah, I'm out.
Yeah,
that's it for me.
All right, that's the out point for everyone.
That's scummy.
Where I draw the line is, I feel like one of the things that I like about a live service is that you're not paying for. You're not having to pay for things that then split the community. So when you look at, for example, like I'm not going to say that Battlefield 5 was an example of a good live service because it wasn't in any way. But if there's anything positive that came out of it was that all the maps were free and it never cut its player base between maps and different types of content. And so once you start charging for maps and areas and characters or whatever on top of your live service, I think that kind of ruins what makes live service appealing in the first place.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that's what hits me, unless it's like a game that is very indie and obviously needs money somehow, and they're trying to do like map packs or something to make that. I'm okay with that, so long as there's not like other things in the game that are problematic. Like a lot of it's a sliding scale of like how many things can you stack on until it tilts the scale to where people aren't going to play the game anymore.
I'd be way more willing to buy map packs for an indie first-person shooter than like a AAA first-person shooter, because it's like I know that I'm sending my money off to like a studio.
Well, AAA, it's like what's your excuse?
More than exactly.
Yeah,
there shouldn't be one, but you know.
All right, so we've got that. Now, next I was going to say the game adds a battle pass that you had to pay money for.
I mean, I'm already out, but honestly, for a lot of things, if you said that first, I would have probably dropped it.
Yep.
In most cases,
it makes me so sad. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Finish, Brett.
in most cases, like, because I'm sure Wyatt was about to say that some battle passes can be handled pretty relatively well, but most of them are not. And so, like,
yes.
Like even like games that I mean I don't play it anymore, but for a while I went super hardcore in Siege, and they just added a battle pass at some point, and it just felt super tacked on and weird. And if you didn't buy it, you didn't get anything from it. So it's like, why am I even going to spend money on it if I'm going to have to grind for like 50 hours to even get the chance to get something? Like it's just
That's fairly close to what I was gonna say. What I was gonna say was like, there's a way to do it correctly, and it just feels like no one does it. Like I think
yeah.
probably the best, like most forgiving battle pass I've ever seen is probably the MCC battle
Yeah.
pass,
It's what I
because
was
it
gonna
just
say.
doesn't care. It's like here's
Yeah.
Well, it
it's-
doesn't
it's
go away.
Just
That's the big thing.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, which is I think is what they're carrying
And it's
over
free.
into
Like, of course, that
Infinite.
helps as well.
Yeah. No, and they're carrying it over into Infinite, which is good, because it's a good battle pass system of like you can unlock whatever and you can go back to any previous battle pass, so there's no FOMO involved. You're not missing out on anything, which is great.
Yeah, and I'll say for me personally, that's the moment I end up wanting to quit games. As soon as they add FOMO mechanics, especially ones that are aggressive, that's why I can't enjoy Destiny anymore. It's why I don't like a lot of MMOs. Some of them don't do it nearly as badly, which is why I still play Final Fantasy, but a lot of MMOs like WoW still use FOMO tactics that are sketchy and weird and not fun. A good example for me of a game that has them but then knows how to counter it is Monster Hunter. So Monster Hunter World had like events that would happen on holidays and whatnot.
Yep.
Which it can be considered FOMO because, like, say you can't play during a certain holiday because you're like visiting family or something, don't have your console, or for whatever reason you can't play during that holiday. You're gonna miss out on the stuff for that amount of time. But what Monster Hunter tends to do is every time they have an event, they usually bring back everything, except for like seasonal attire and whatnot. Now that's still not amazing because you still are missing out on like seasonal stuff if you do want like the Christmas attire or whatnot. You can't get that until it's holiday season. Or the Halloween costumes and whatnot, which are usually really fun. You can't get them till it's around Halloween.
And those are really annoying too, because like when you look at Halo's the way that like Halo Reach did its or Halo.
Well,
3,
before we break back to Halo, I want to describe what Monster Hunter did.
Well, I was gonna say. Okay, no, go ahead.
Yeah, because I'm still in the Monster Hunter realm right now.
Okay.
What they did to counter this becoming a problem when the game is quote unquote dead, of like it's not receiving new updates. They make it so every 2 weeks, they just cycle between different holidays, with no regard for the calendar. So there's always a holiday event going on. If it's not the one you want, you just at the most you have to wait for like a month, and it'll roll back around. So that I think has been the most elegant solution I've seen for still having like the seasonal attire on all the be available for players and whatnot, and everything is like acquirable at the same time. The events just cycle through.
Nice. Yeah. No, my thing is that it's like with seasonal, like I always think of the first time it really affected me in a game was like, I remember when seasonal skins and stuff started coming out for Overwatch, and that's when I first really like noticed it a lot, because I was really playing the game when they first started doing it. I was really into it. And I thought to myself, it's like, it's not impressive that you have this like May skin from the Christmas event, because all that really says is you played the game a bunch during Christmas. Like
Instead
it really
of
doesn't
being with family.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like it's not. There's no as much of a meme as it is. There's no sense of pride and accomplishment from getting a seasonal skin, because it just means you played the game a bunch in a specific span of time, and that's not exciting. It's not impressive. You know, it just I have it.
Well, the thing that always gets me is like, what if I do play the game a bunch in that time and then get unlucky and not get the seasonal skin that I want? That's
like,
when
I wasted my time.
Super upset, because then I'm like, well, now I can't get this. I did the effort. And like, I think that's the thing a lot of games nowadays get wrong, is that they forget that people that play games usually, especially if they're adults, have jobs and other social things they have to do, to where you can't play a game for like 6 hours a day generally, which is usually what these games will use as like a baseline for how to acquire everything in an upgrade, is they want people playing like 6 hours every other day or something. I think the reality is like tons of games, especially online ones that have new content, people play for like 2 to 5 hours a week. Maybe there's like tons of casual players that make up the bases of those games that just don't get to see a lot of content because the devs lock it behind so much grind, and especially like time locked grind.
And then if you have a game dev team that starts catering to the more casual players, the more sweaty players get upset because there's not enough content.
Well, I mean, there's a way to cater to both. You just need to be really careful and not constantly flip flop. That's the thing. Is like so many devs flip flop.
A perfect example of being able to cater to both, and I've talked about this before. Deep Rock Galactic, I think, does a great job of like if you just want to play the game casually and just unlock things slowly because they're all just cosmetics and stuff like that. It's
and nothing
fine.
goes away. That's the big thing.
No, there's no seasonal stuff. It's all there when you want to tackle it and when you're ready for it. But if you really want to get sweaty and hardcore with it, you can do that, and there's plenty of content there for you. I think it's strikes such a great balance, and that's why it's partially why I love playing that game so much, is because all of these other live service models, it's like there's so much pressure. And it's like when you play it, it's like I'm not enjoying it anymore because like I gotta unlock the next thing before it goes away. And it doesn't become fun to unlock things anymore. It just becomes like
it's a
work.
chore.
It becomes a grind. It's a chore. Whereas in Deep Rock, it's like all this is here when you want to tackle it. If you don't feel like it and you just want to kick back and relax, go for it. Whereas with other games, it's like I can't relax and just play the game anymore because I'm always working towards something, which usually is a good thing. But if you're being forced to do it and you're not enjoying yourself doing it, it's just you have to do it. It's not fun anymore.
As soon as you add an impending deadline to a thing I want to earn, I get very, very not wanting to do that content. Like I will just not do that part of the game because I don't want to deal with it. Like that's a consistent thing.
The thing that usually gets around it for me is like if it does like the Monster Hunter sort of thing where like it's timed for now, but like this is just if you want to get it like I guess early, but then it'll come back later. It'll go into the normal rotation of things. Like I'm usually fine with having like a deadline sort of thing in the game if it comes back later. Yeah, because then both. Everyone's happy. The people that did the challenges or whatever get the thing early, definitely, and then everyone else, if they want to wait, then it gets put into the random pool with all the other things that you can get.
Yeah,
and it just feels like.
Go ahead, Wyatt.
It just feels like so many games are designed without the knowledge that people have lives and things to do outside of games. You know, and it's so annoying.
Play multiple games, like that's another thing. Is a lot of people will play like 3 or 4 different games at a time. And if you're demanding all of their time and they can't play, say, like, I'm the kind of person that tends to like playing a multiplayer game and a single player game at the same time. Mm-hmm. So when a game is demanding so much time that I can't do that, I get frustrated with it and tend to either like put it on the back burner or drop it. So that's definitely a thing on my end that I think about a lot.
The most chaotic form of allowing players to take breaks is Gundam Battle Operation 2 on the PS4 has a system where if you don't play for like I think it like 3 months or something, if you don't play for 3 months, then you come back and you just the currency is just overflowing. So it's made me at some points being like, oh, it's been a while since I've played this. I kind of want to play today, and then I go, but if I wait a little longer and just wait till I feel like playing it again, then I'll get something out of it. So I'll just do that later.
It's a game that rewards you by not playing it. That's ingenious.
Oh, it's that welcome back bonus. It's like, thank you for remembering us. Here's 1,000 premium currency.
Yeah.
Oh, thank
that's
God.
an interesting one. And yeah, I do think
that game is super weird.
I do think that's an example of like why FOMO mechanics are such a weird, contentious thing, because I think a lot of developers, and especially designers, will see them and be like, okay, it's causing player engagement, that means it's good. And this is the classic, like, Blizzard talked at BlizzCon a long time ago. They did a talk where one of the lead devs of WoW came up and said, like, we know players are having fun if they engage past the minimum amount of required times to earn a reward in content. So, like, if a reward requires you run this thing 5 times, if they run it 7 times, that means they're enjoying that content. And to me, that's just such a weird, arbitrary measurement of like, it may not be they're enjoying it. It may just be they need something to do, so they're doing that. Right?
I mean, my first thought as like a rebuttal to that is like, almost anyone I talk to that plays Destiny doesn't enjoy themselves. They're engaged. There's technically player engagement, but they don't enjoy it at all. It's like a second or third job.
Or they enjoy the gunplay, but they don't enjoy having to do like the progression of
It's a perfect
getting these
example of like
rewards.
player engagement doesn't mean they're enjoying the content. It's because they feel like they have to because of the way you've set up your progression to begin with.
I think there's
yeah.
such a
The
thing
single
as
player bits?
negative engagement. There's positive engagement and negative engagement.
Yeah. For
Go
sure.
ahead, Alex.
The single player bits and things where there's good story or lore, which
That exists.
yes, why it's gotten a lot better in the most recent seasons.
See, yeah,
Um,
you fans always tell me that, and you're always right. I'm sorry. Keep going.
When you become a narrative designer for Bungie, let me know.
Oh my god. Harsh. All right.
Oof.
You don't need to be an narrative to know how trash it is. You really don't. It's pretty.
You just need to be able to pronounce words that come out of your mouth instead of saying narjej. What even was that?
I will
Good
say,
job.
so I did recently go back and play Beyond Light for the first time, and try out some of the new starting area for like returning players and whatnot. And I will say the way they presented the story felt very cinematic and very, it felt very like classic Halo of when you would drop into a zone and get like this cinematic entryway and then you're doing all this fighting and whatnot. And then it would just like constantly interrupt what you're doing with like advertisements for the Eververse and all this shenanigans of live service stuff of like people would talk about, oh, you can see all these cool rewards. It specifically drops you in like hubs, so you see all the players with their look at me, I have the nicest glamour and whatnot over in this area. And it's so, after like an intense story moment when I suddenly see players running around in like pink and in yellow armor and like doing goofy things, that is one way to instantly take me out of it. I'm not saying that's a bad thing because I play Final Fantasy and that's exactly the same. I play Warframe, that's exactly the same. I think it's the thing I notice of like it changes what the tone of the game is to me, where like those games often aren't trying to do those narrative heavy things, or if they are, they're keeping you in an area where you're not going to immediately get taken out of it when you return, which is just an interesting thing. But I do think the one thing Bungie really did pioneer was FOMO on single player content. I never thought that I would have to have fear of missing out for a single player campaign for a game. I never thought I would have that. And then they removed half the game.
I just remember there's so many moments in like what's supposed to be your main story content. Like a character appears or someone name drops something and I'm like, what? What's that? Who is that? What's going on? Like I'll always go back to can I spoil Forsaken here, or are we not gonna spoil Forsaken?
Can you play Forsaken still, Alex? Is that still a thing you can play the story of?
I played
That's
it
another
on
thing. Oh jeez. You keep taking out content.
I was able to play it on my Warlock after Beyond Light dropped.
Okay, so let's not spoil Forsaken. Let's not spoil anything that you can still play through.
I didn't have to go through the final quests and things. Well, there was an epilogue bit that was taken out because it was on a planet that was removed.
But the
you could go
actual
through
main story is
the
still
basic
part.
story.
Well, then, without going into specifics, there's a character that appears at the end of the Forsaken story that if you weren't paying attention to anything that wasn't the main story, you would have no idea what's going on. And a lot of the drama and a lot of the impact that the story may or may not or may have had for you is completely lost if you have no idea what's going on in the end. And that's supposed to be your main story. And if no one knows what's going on, I mean, you pretty much failed.
Yeah.
And I have friends that are really into lore, like, oh no, it's this thing, it's that. It was all well explained. It's like, yeah, but it wasn't explained here in this story where it matters, where it has to be explained. It has to be built up to that and not just dropped out of nowhere last minute with like maybe one or two lore entries or whatever, like briefly explaining it.
I mean, to me, I think that to me is a very per player thing. That's not something that would make me stop playing a game.
Yeah,
That's,
I'm
go
invested
ahead,
in the story and the world that it happens in, so I go the extra mile. Which, yeah, for an average player, you shouldn't have to. You shouldn't make them have to do that. But if I'm invested enough in the world where the story is happening, I'm gonna look things up. I'm gonna look at lore entries. I'm going to listen to Bife read things for fun.
Yeah, I think because like playing through MMO storylines, where I've played WoW and 14 and Elder Scrolls Online before, they do that fairly often to where you'll hear like about things in side quests or in lore, and they'll hype up something outside of the main story. And if you just do the main story, you won't know what this person is or who this is or what object they're talking about. Generally, the way they get around it being too noticeable is that it's usually not that important of a thing. Like, it's not going to be the crux of the storyline unless they end up explaining it somewhere. But it does mean that players that are really engaged have this really cool aha moment where they see something that, like, if you're that engaged with the lore and whatnot, and you're that looking that forward to seeing this like mythical thing, like the classic example is World of Warcraft had, I think it was Ashbringer, this like crazy sword that's like alive or something that kept being mentioned in like the books and the outside of game stuff, and then it shows up in the game at one point and people lost their minds because they were like, oh my god, this awesome sword's here. So that's something that definitely happened in that game, and I think it can be this really cool moment where it gives people a reason to dive into content outside the main game and also enjoy it. But it's also like depends on what genre your game's in, depends on what kind of players you're catering to with that.
Well, it depends on what's being affected, right? Because if it's a weapon or something and there's a lot of cool lore behind it, a lot of people that know know a lot of the backstory and the lore are gonna be like, oh, that's a cool like bit of lore, it's a cool weapon. But for people who don't know it, they're just gonna be like, oh, this is a cool weapon that I got as a reward for something. But with the specifically with Destiny, with what I brought up, that's a huge story thing. That's not it doesn't work on both levels for like hardcore fans and casual fans. It only works on one of those levels. And I feel like for something like the main story, it has to work for both. Like maybe lore nerds will get something extra out of it, but people who don't read the lore should still know
Enjoy
what's
it,
going
like
on.
be able to have a grasp of what's happening.
Because as someone
I
who
get where
doesn't,
you're coming from.
as someone who doesn't know, it made no sense. It came out of nowhere, and I'm like, what's happening? Like I don't know. That's
For either new players who are starting either in any of the DLCs really, and not from D1 or the beginning of D2, it's not player friendly.
Yeah,
and it does it shitty, but I'm still involved in the world.
No,
So,
and I'm sure for people who are, it was a great reveal. Like I'm not taking that away from you at all. But I think sweeping it aside of as being like, oh well, if you read the lore, you would get it. That's not.
I also think it is fair to give.
Mean?
Like we're talking a lot about negatives of Destiny. I think one of the positives is I do think it looks like they've learned from that mistake. Like I haven't heard of that happening again in newer stuff. So I don't think that's the thing where they were like they made that same mistake over and over again. Because I do think one thing I want to point out is with these live service games, a lot of it's uncharted territory. People haven't really done a lot of, aside from like Blizzard, who's done tons of storytelling over like 10 years with WoW. This isn't a thing most devs get the chance to do ever. Like playing with this time stuff and like feeling what it actually is like to play through a game over the course of like years, as opposed to a couple of days or weeks. So I think they're trying things is still important, and we're gonna get things that don't work, and that's fine. So long as we learn from what doesn't work.
On the flip side of that, I think one thing that Destiny has done really well, and I think something that's really cool that I want to see more in terms of like live service storytelling. Within the same DLC, I love how they handled the raid and how the first team to beat the raid then unlocked content for other players.
That's cool.
Because of story reasons, which is so cool. And I wish, and maybe it has because I'm a couple of seasons and a couple of expansions behind at this point, but I would love to see more things like that, because that is the kind of like live service storytelling that I think is super interesting and is also very inclusive to all players.
Well, I think they did the same thing. It was a little more understated, as more of a lore explanation. But I do think they still did some. They did something along the lines of that for the for Forsaken, with the first team that completed The Last Wish.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about.
Oh, yeah. They did it for Beyond Light 2 with Deep Stone.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah, no, I would love to see more of that, because it's like, oh, you finished the raid, and because of story reasons, legitimate story reasons, it unlocked it was a new strike, and I think the whatever that other patrol area was called started changing as well because of what you did in that first. It's so cool, and it makes you feel like you're in the world with the other players and not just your own story.
That's great.
That's
It gives hardcore players something to strive for.
The raid itself unlocked a new dungeon for
super
people,
cool.
which is essentially a 1 to 3 person raid.
And I think another example of that I think was beginning to take shape and kind of stopped before it could really go anywhere. Again, I'm going to bring up Battlefield 5's live service, because it tried to do a similar thing where it had its Tides of War battle pass, right? And as they introduced the US and Japanese factions, they started to have, okay, we're going to put US troops in this map where the British troops normally would have been, because we're kind of showing the influence of the U.S. military in World War II over time. So as the Tides of War goes on, we're going to see different battles between different factions based on how it would have actually have been in World War II, which is such an interesting idea. And it kind of started, and then they just ended their live service because it's Battlefield 5.
That's the kind of thing you need to see through.
But it was starting to happen, and it was so cool. I was like, I see what you're trying to do here. Finally, it's a mess, and it still doesn't work.
Why?
But it's
you know
really
what? You know
cool.
what game that reminds me of? Reminds me of Mag. Back in the PS3 days, of how Mag would adjust based on like how strong certain factions were. PlanetSide 2 does the same thing with the 3 factions, where like you get different objectives.
Yep. I've talked about Defiance, the MMO, before. Tried to do a weirdly similar thing, but also involved a whole TV show and stuff like that. There's so much.
An MMO did stuff with a TV show and not just things like.
So I'll give it another rundown. Yeah, I'll give it another rundown.
Yeah,
so
go through it
quickly.
Sci-fi show.
Sci-fi show called Defiance. It was kind of a sci-fi show that really didn't take off that much.
Discount Firefly.
Discount Firefly is a good way to describe it. But just before the show's release, they released an entire MMO that took place in the same world and had a lot of the same characters. And the idea was that as players did certain things in the MMOs, it became more as they did more and more sort of things in the world, it would affect the results of the TV show, and the TV show would affect the results of the game. And I also seem to remember there was something where if your character became well known enough or high level enough, they would actually appear in the show. They would
I think it was like a world. It was like a world first thing or something like that, where if your character was like the first to high level or something crazy. It was a cool idea. It didn't work out super well in practice, but it could have. I think if
mostly because the show just didn't garner enough interest.
The show wasn't super high effort. The MMO was also like baseline fun, but had a lot of issues. It just a lot of examples of things that like
it still has the following though. I'm shocked that it's still
like the only third person shooter MMO that's still around. Most of the others died, which is a shame. But yeah. I do think a good example of what we were talking about a little while ago of like a game leveraging time and like player first achievements and whatnot to change the world is Final Fantasy XIV has this like crazy cool idea of this thing called the Firmament, which is a city that came out in the first expansion that you can go to after you finish the game, and you like learn about that they're restoring the city. So you have to go with your crafting disciplines and like take materials and help them rebuild the city. And what actually happened is there were 33 stages to the city rebuilding, and it was server wide. Like every single player could contribute to this and rebuilding this entire zone. And then as they made progress, it would change appearances and new quests would appear, even people that didn't participate. So it was like affecting the whole server. And now there's like this legendary achievement in the 14 community. If you see someone wandering around with the Saint of the Firmament title, you know that they were one of the players that like did the most for that thing, and now it's going to be like a new housing zone in the newest expansion. So
they need more land in Final Fantasy 14.
It's one of those things that's like super cool of how this was handled. A great way to like leverage the fact that this took place over like 2 years of players doing this. So it wasn't like a quick immediate thing. It was a thing that existed for a really long time that has turned into a payoff for the entire game essentially.
It also reminds me, and maybe you can fill in more information than I can because I don't know a whole lot about it. But it sounds a lot like the what's it called? The Gates of It's a World of Warcraft thing. It's called the Gates of
Ank'Harel?
What?
Is that it?
Encourage.
Courage.
I don't know if you remember that whole event, but it was this whole sort of server-wide event where your clan would and I might be butchering this entirely, but this is how it was described to me. Your clan basically donates a bunch of materials to something. I forget exactly what it is. Again, I don't play WoW, so I can't really speak to it. But if your clan was able to donate enough materials, you're basically able to open the gates to Encourage, and there was some sort of like reward for your clan, and you got this like fancy title and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think the
which
difference is the goal of like with 14, it's very much a whole server activity that when completed unlocks rewards for everyone. I think it's kind of the goals are different of what they're trying to achieve. Where one is still kind of a competition of like trying to upgrade your own guild, whereas the other one is like this is going to change forever over the course of the MMO. Like now you can go to that zone and there's a whole new thing of like because people are celebrating the finished construction of the zone. There's tons of events going on everywhere, and you can do like fun little mini games with your crafters and whatnot. That people unlock. So I think it's a different scale of like what they're going for. I think both are really cool, but it is like a kind of different situation. But I do want to refocus us onto talking about things that make us the annoyances that will eventually make us quit games. So I have a specific moment with Destiny 2 that made me stop playing religiously. So Alex, I am sure you remember the pains of the summer armor sets. The glows that you could get from like
God.
the
You mean the
events.
event that's coming up next week?
Yes.
Actually,
You know what?
No,
Yes.
starting tomorrow. It's starting
You know what?
Tuesday.
It's funny that you mentioned that, Ryan, because I'm pretty sure that's what ruined it for me too. I think
So
that's why I was like, I'm done
I
for
played
good.
that game every day for like 4 hours, and I could not get even one fully maxed out set.
Yep.
For like, I didn't have the full event, so I only did it for like, I think around 2/3 of the event, or maybe 3/5 in that area, and still could not get a maxed out set for my hunter. So that was the moment where I was like, this is just like, I spent so much time doing this, and now I get nothing for it. And additionally, they made promises about how that armor was going to be the first armor set to be armor 2.0 and like transferable and transmogged between different things. And then the entire armor 2.0 thing like completely fell through and was horrid. It wasn't proper transmog. It wasn't what people wanted. And it was this whole thing of like this stuff was promised and then was not actually paying off in the way that it was supposed to pay off. And I think it was misleading, and it was also just a horrific grind in the worst way possible. It was bonkers. Yeah. That was the moment for me that like took me from playing Destiny every day to being like, okay, this is not really fun.
Yeah.
I need to take a step back and be like, what am I actually trying to get out of this game? I think I was like, I want to do the story, and I finished the story. So I was like, all right, bye.
You're trying to get fancy armor because the end game is the fashion show. But the thing with and something that has annoyed me with the Solstice sets.
Yeah,
you
Solstice
cannot mix and match them with any other pieces of armor.
Yep.
They don't look good with anything but themselves.
They're like a different art style, which is great because they look really cool, but they also, like, you can't mix them. And that's one of the most fun things about a game like Warframe or something, is mixing different pieces and whatnot and coming up with new looks. That was kind of the point where I hit, like, people told me the end game in Destiny was fashion. I was like, but if I want a game where the end game is fashion, I can go play like Final Fantasy, where there's like way more that I can
I also
do.
want a game with better looking armor sets than Destiny 2.
Not even better looking. I think Destiny 2's got some great armor sets, but they're just not very diverse. Like, they all tend to fit a similar aesthetic, or like two or three different looks.
Yeah,
And
nothing else has Destiny's aesthetic. So if you want fashion endgame with Destiny's aesthetic,
it's also a personal preference. I really missed the sets from Destiny 1 that were very much like Knights in Space, and it was very much
that's the aesthetic that I want.
Like D1
that
Iron
is the
Banner.
aesthetic I want. I
want
want World
Iron
of Warcraft
Banner.
in space. Give me World of Warcraft in space, and I'm in.
Yeah, D1 Iron Banner was some great looking stuff. It was awesome.
So can I say one of the things that, or wait, no, I want you to finish the Destiny stuff before.
I'm good. Yeah.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
going.
Well, so you and several other people have been trying to get me to start Final Fantasy 14.
We're just
Um,
informing you, Alex, that there is a free trial that goes all the way up to level 60 and includes the critically acclaimed first expansion, Heaven's Ward.
It's like a cult.
What a
was
plug!
just
Okay, it's like
to
a
say
cult. Why
that.
are we still here?
It is a
I was
meme.
just
It's a
about
meme
to
now.
say that.
What
It
a
is a
plug.
copy pasta now.
So one of the things that get so the Final Fantasy games that I've played. Oh, I've actually only played 6.
Hey, I mean that's a
Well.
good one.
But
So
no, I've played most of 5, all of 6, watched 7 and 7 remake.
yeah, so you got a good mix in there. You got some of the good
But-
ones.
But it's
More than me.
and they're their own contained games.
Yeah.
One of the things that because I also love the aesthetic of a bunch of the Final Fantasy games, whether it's more fantastical or gets more techy and industrial. I think they still pull them off pretty well. One of the things that I'm worried about, because I want to like Final Fantasy 14, but I'm worried that once I start playing it, I'll be way too overwhelmed with all the story that I need to catch up with.
Dude, the story is the best part of the game. That's the thing when everyone's like talking about Final Fantasy is like no one who wants people to try the free trial is like trying to push them to rush the story because like I've been playing this game for 7 years. I'm not caught up to the story because I'm taking it at my own pace and enjoying it because it's really good. Like that's the way to approach Final Fantasy is approach it like a normal Final Fantasy game where you're like, okay, the story's going to be a slow burn, but the payoff is always going to be there. Like, there's not a single thing in the entire 14 storyline so far that hasn't paid off. Like, that's the thing that matters to me. Like, that's the difference between 14 and World of Warcraft for someone that cares about story. Because, like, World of Warcraft has characters that they drop constantly. There's entire story arcs that just kind of end and vanish. Whereas 14, like, a good example is a character shows up early on in a side mission in 14. You're going to see them in the main story at some point, and they're going to be important. Like, it's gonna if you learn a character is like doing an important side thing, they're gonna show up later in the story, and they do it really well where you don't need the information. Because for a lot of them, what happened is I would be playing the story, as character would show up and like do this really cool intro thing and like introduce themselves and whatnot, and then you can go back and like play the quest line that they were in and see what was going on. Like you'll learn about what was actually happening in the background, and because it's an MMO that can like know what you've played and what you haven't played, the dialogue will change to reflect whether or not you've met them before. So like there's a bit where a character's like, okay, we need to go visit this person. Have you met them before? And then my character goes, oh no, I haven't seen them before. And then they give me an introduction as to who they are. Like the exact same thing why it was talking about of being concerned about is like there are ways around that. But I think that's the thing that 14 did really well and it continues to do well. Where it's just like the best part of it, the thing that has made me quit every other MMO I've played is FOMO. Of like, eventually they add these FOMO mechanics where you need to do your dailies, you need to log in and do all this crazy stuff. 14 has such a large amount of content that isn't related to that, and nothing is ever going away. That's like the huge thing, is that you know when you leave 14, and like the developers have said this consistently, they are perfectly okay with you taking like a year-long break and not playing the game and coming back in a year and just continuing from where you left off because they're not gonna mess it up for you. That's like the big difference in mindset between them and like a lot of other developers. Yeah, it does mean the starting point is slower because it hasn't changed because they can't really change it since it is like the same continuous story the entire time. That stuff doesn't change, but the rest of it means they can do so much more with like allowing the player to really play how they want to play, which is a big deal to me personally. There's a spiel.
The second thing that, and this is I guess more traditionally on our point, for tonight's episode,
Yeah.
would be so starting up a game, you love the aesthetic, how it feels, surface level mechanics of it, all pretty fun and enjoyable. And then you are thrust into a very poorly done tutorial.
Dude, 14's got like the best tutorials in the MMO genre.
Oh no, this is not something about Final Fantasy 14. This is
No, this is Ryan trying to indoctrinate you into playing.
This is he's still in the cult like mindset.
This is
Critically
several games
acclaimed
that I've
free
run
trial.
into that I think it's been at least 3 games where it's okay. I really like how this sounds, how this plays initially, and then I'm thrust into a tutorial that says, okay, here's the basic stuff that you should already know, and then it doesn't explain how stuff actually works under the hood. Or, oh, there's a gajillion different submenus that you would need to get into to actually
Yeah.
be able to properly upgrade this weapon that you will need for a certain boss. And it just doesn't
Or if it's
explain
like-
any of the game systems to a level where, as I said in the beginning, I don't know if we were recording at this point. As I said earlier, my rock hard and not moist enough brain cannot absorb.
Yeah, I get that. I think that tends to be a huge problem with a lot of RPGs. Of they'll have this like weird esoteric thing. I'm sure, Brett, you've been going back and playing a lot of old school JRPGs.
Mhm.
I'm positive you run into this at least once or twice.
I ran into it yesterday, which
Yep.
I mean, this will connect to the thing that I was gonna say. But I started playing and stopped playing Tales of Legendia because people said it was the worst one, and it probably is. But
Legendia.
it was
I
literally
didn't even
just
know
like,
that existed. Never heard of
yeah,
it.
it's
There you go.
it's on the PS2, and don't bother. But like it was literally like I mean imagine having a bad tutorial. Imagine just not having one. Like if I didn't already play a different Tales game beforehand, I wouldn't have known what like the combat was for this one, because it was just like 5-minute cutscene and then you're on the overworld, have fun. And then the first and only tutorial that I have seen in I think I stopped playing at 7 hours on the dot was how to bake bread.
How to bake bread.
And that was the only tutorial that they give. And by that point, I was just like, okay. And it ends up being like the food, because you can like, eat food after battles, and it'll like feed the whole team or whatever, and you'll get health back. But then yeah, they just didn't say how to do anything else after that. And I was like, cool.
Well, Brett.
Good.
Oh, Brett. At yeast, they gave you that.
Oh
Oh.
boy. But yeah, I definitely think
Oh.
that's a thing that's super prevalent in a lot of, especially older JRPGs that didn't have a lot of budget and probably didn't have the time to do tutorials. I do think there are games that can use that to their advantage. Like, I think that's a huge appeal of games like Dark Souls, is the fact that you do really need to figure things out on your own. And I
But
think
there's not much beyond the surface level mechanics of dodging, of like, there's not an extensive upgrade menu that you can get lost in Dark Souls.
If you haven't played a game like it, then yes, but it's also compared to other like RPG things, it's a screen of numbers. Welcome to the
because Dark Souls doesn't really
land of
explain the
video
stats or
games.
anything until the newer ones, where it would be like, oh yeah, this stat does this. But there's still esoteric things, like nobody tells you when you look at your stat screen that you'll eventually find a sword that scales on luck. No one's going to tell you that. You just
Yeah.
need to find the sword that scales
Sorry,
on
there's
luck.
what?
There's a sword that scales on luck.
There's luck in Dark Souls 3, yes.
Oh, 3. I've only played
Yeah.
1.
Yeah.
But
But that's
in a lot of
that
things
is
like that can be
the
fun.
Stupid centipede.
the best kind of tutorial, I think, is the Dark Souls kind, where it's like, I mean, I guess on the surface it is just like a bunch of dev notes on the ground that you can look at, but it's literally just right in your face. Here are the buttons and what they do.
Figure it out.
And immediately there's just enemies that you can try them on right next to them.
And if you're
I-
replaying the game, you can totally skip it and you don't have to
Oh,
bother,
yeah.
which is nice
Yeah.
as well.
It's the
I think I
best.
will take that any day over Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword. 6 hours of tutorials.
Oh,
Fun as that game can be.
I forgot about that. And now it's on the Switch.
Yeah, coming
Yes.
soon. So yeah, I do think that that's a fair point of like tutorials being a big killer. The thing that always gets me with that is when people play a game that has a tutorial and skip the tutorial and then say they don't know how to play the game and quit it. That is the thing that gets
I
me.
agree.
Yeah, no,
Hitting
that's on
yourself in
you.
the foot, in the leg, in the knee, and then the pelvis.
Mhm.
I've seen so many people like buy Smash Brothers or Guilty Gear or something and then go to play the game and just be like, oh, I don't need to see the tutorial, right? And then just go online, and then they are upset that they got trounced, and I'm like,
Well, no.
You didn't
With
try.
Smash, no. With Smash, they're upset that the connection is always terrible, but then they also get upset that they also get destroyed. So
yeah, well, there's that.
it's 50-50.
Yep. So I do definitely get the tutorial point. I think that is like a noticeable issue with a lot of games. But yeah, I also think one other thing that tends to kill a lot of games for me is when we have this push now for a lot of games to have cosmetic microtransactions, and the it's kind of become widely accepted in that like that is the route you go if you don't have the budget to make this game without microtransactions, make them all cosmetic. The thing that gets me with that is that oftentimes you'll see devs make a game and then have a cosmetic microtransactions and then not have cool cosmetics not in the microtransactions.
Mhm.
At which point I lose the drive for wanting to do the microtransactions at all, because I'm like, the thing that will convince me to wear like an armor piece or a cool pet or something in a game is how I got it. Like that's always the thing that matters more. Is it's not even does it look
There's
the
a
coolest,
story
it's like,
behind it.
what did I put the most effort in, or what is the coolest thing that I have? And that's a thing that you just don't get with cosmetics, because you might see like a really cool cosmetic thing, but you could just buy it and it's zero effort, and then like what's the point at that point of having that thing, because there's nothing to it, like there's no substance behind it, which I think is like especially the case in a game like Assassin's Creed Valhalla, where they have all these microtransactions for armor sets and whatnot that are cool looking, but at the same time I just go like, what's the point to any of these?
I remember running into that when I was playing Odyssey. It's just like, wow, yeah, these don't look like I could earn them in game. They look like they're specifically from a microtransaction store, and I don't want that aesthetic on my character.
It's also because Valhalla does this thing I love. Like I love when a game has like upgradable equipment and the appearance changes after a couple of upgrades.
Mhm.
And Valhalla does that for so many pieces of like the base game armor, but it doesn't do it for DLC armor. And that's a thing to me that I'm like, so now not only am I missing out on like a cool quest or something to get this armor in the base game, I also don't get the enjoyment of like upgrading it and seeing the appearance change as I invest more materials in it, which is such a cool thing. It gives you a really good sense of progression. Like it's why I do think like as much as I bounced off of Valhalla the first time I played it, just because of like the timing and so many other open world things coming out right around it. Having stuff like the city to build and upgradable armor and whatnot that changes appearance really goes a long way in making me want to keep playing the game, because that's things that like I want to see those final upgrades and whatnot. Whereas when I just get a thing in its final form and it's like the coolest thing in the game, but I didn't do anything to get it, I'm just like, what? Why do I have this? What do I care?
Especially in Valhalla's case, because whenever you want to get a new piece of armor, there's always like a little like environmental like puzzle or just some sort of like set of tasks you have to do to get to it. Even if they don't explicitly tell you it, it's like, okay, you have to walk up here and then you have to like shoot this explosive barrel so this door opens, and you have to, so there's always like an effort that goes into getting a new piece of armor. So when you finally get it, yes, especially if it finishes a set, like if you're like, oh, I want the whole stealth set, you finish the stealth set and you're like, yes, I worked for it. It didn't
Super
take me too long, and it didn't take you too long. It wasn't some like crazy like whatever that grind.
It wasn't
for,
RNG. That's a big thing to me. Is like I didn't have to rely on like a 5% chance for something.
Also, you mentioned specifically a stealth set. If it's doing things that specifically pertain to like doing stealth missions or things to get this, all the more satisfying.
Yeah.
I especially love it when like this is a big thing that Kingdom Hearts has done consistently, of like they have the Ultima weapon, which you get after like doing literally everything else in the game. They just give you a weapon that's just so ungodly broken that you never need to worry about the difficulty again. I love it when games have that kind of thing where it's just like this reward for completing as much as you can of the game or doing whatever as much of the things that are fun.
Or after you 100% Spider-Man for the PS4, you get to see him in his underwear.
Yeah, I mean that's great. It's the kind of thing I love. Of just having these goofy little things, especially because Spider-Man for the PS4, the underwear suit has this cool effect where you one-hit kill things, but you get one-hit killed. I love that kind of stuff.
That's awesome.
You get it's just a fun variant on the game. A classic example is like Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1 and 2, the remaster that Vicarious did. you can unlock like I think it's called like Skater Heaven or Skater Valhalla or something by like perfecting a whole bunch of the stages in one of the games.
Skate Holla.
Yeah, and then you unlock Skate Holla, and it's great. That's the kind of thing that I love so much. Of you get this cool reward that's just more stuff to muck about with. And when games don't have that, I think it does reflect, especially when it's an RPG or something, they don't have that like final reward or whatever it is for beating it or something cool. Like a lot of people will talk about like MacGuffins in JRPGs, and I'm like, I love the MacGuffins because eventually I get to use the MacGuffins.
Yeah,
And that's cool.
Right.
Yeah.
Wrathguard, Sunder, and Keening.
So many cool things in games that a lot of things just devs don't take advantage of this opportunity to have these cool items and whatnot that can give your player a lot of enjoyment. And I also think that's why I don't know if you all are super familiar with Housemarque outside of Returnal, but they put out a talk about how like the arcade shooter genre is dead because their shooter Nex Machina didn't do particularly well. And I think
their
like
shooter didn't do well, they say the genre's dead.
well, their shooters, it's really good. That's one part of it. Is it's a really well-made game. But I think the reason it doesn't do well, and those arcade games tend to not do well, and as Brett was saying before, like shoot 'em ups and rail shooters are kind of in the same category, is they don't have a progression thing that can drive you to want to finish it, right? And it's a simple thing to have, like just be a cosmetic. I think a lot of shoot 'em ups now are doing this right, where they have like you can get like the R-type collection, and you unlock different ship designs and whatnot that don't function any different, but give you cool different ships that you can just like you can have fun unlocking them.
It's something.
It's like give me something I can do that gives me a reason to play the game more, even if it's the most basic thing possible, like skins. It doesn't matter. So long as I can unlock something after playing the game or doing this specific thing, I'm having fun.
Oh yeah, like in this really doesn't have to do with the topic, just what you were talking about. In Horizon Zero Dawn, you get different face paint options for New Game Plus depending on what achievements you got in the.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that's it. It's the kind of thing where like just having simple modifiers like that. Like Journey has basically no progression except for the scarf that changes length based on what you're doing, and like that is enough. Like just having something that is driving some force of like I can get new things and I'm having some kind of upgrade that gives me a reason to see the game to the end, especially if you don't have a story. I think that's what a lot of arcade games tend to get wrong.
That's what I was gonna say. If you have a pretty story-heavy game and you're engaged in the story, like I'm fine with just getting to the end for the story. But if you don't, I want to be able to unlock things and like just personalize my player character more.
You're telling me you're okay with not being able to play as Ellie in a clown wig for your New Game Plus of Last of Us 2?
Look, I want that now. I would love that.
God.
If you bump into something, your nose squeaks and it gives away your position and stuff.
It's incredible. Yeah, that'd be great. No,
I do also. This is something, kind of pivoting a little bit. This isn't something that's like general for all live service games, but I want to talk specifically, and maybe Brett can chime in. I want to talk specifically about Modern Warfare for a minute here, because I love Modern Warfare. I know a lot of people didn't, but I love that game to death. There were two big things that kind of stopped me from playing, and again, these are only specific to Warzone, but they're all live service specific, right? So the first thing is Warzone came out, and it became very clear as Warzone became more and more popular that Activision did not care about the core multiplayer modes at all. They cared a lot more about supporting Warzone and making more content for that and really balancing everything for Warzone and less for the core multiplayer, which is what I was really into because I hate Warzone. I don't like battle royales, and Warzone just frustrates the heck out of me. I hate it. The other thing is they did add a battle pass after launch. They just kind of shadow dropped it, being a little cheeky about it, and that's obviously not great. But it wasn't actually the worst battle pass I've ever seen, because yes, you did have to pay for it, which is a giant pain in the butt. But you had to use their sort of in-game sort of COD point currency, right? And the thing is, you can earn, at least early on, you could earn COD points by just doing certain things in the game and just playing the game. You didn't have to actually spend any money. So I was able to buy like 3 or 4 battle passes and not actually have to spend a single dollar, because they actually gave you a good amount. And what's nice too is once you get your first battle pass, they would give you as rewards for every other tier, they would give you COD points. So if you played enough, and you don't even have to play the full battle pass, but as long as you got enough into the battle pass, you could pay for the next battle pass, which was really cool, all for free. You know, it was great. I never spent a single dime on that game outside of like the base $60 price for it. And it was great. And then they got rid of it. You could no longer get COD points by playing the game. You could no longer get it in battle passes. So
That sounds like something that would. That sounds like something that would make me stop playing a game.
yeah,
you
it
still
was
you can still get them.
really. But I
Yeah.
remember specifically the last time I played, I was looking at the battle pass and I didn't see any COD points as like a reward because they give it to you pretty early on in the pass. So maybe I'm wrong, but that's one of the reasons I stopped. Is like, oh, they're clearly not doing that anymore.
They spread it out pretty. I know they're not focusing on Modern Warfare anymore with the battle passes, but there's also not really anything to like. That means there isn't anything to earn for Modern Warfare in
They
them
still
anymore,
update it
because
from
Cold
time to
War's
time.
out. Well, yeah,
They
because
still update
Warzone's
it.
attached to it,
Yeah.
but they don't add anything new to Modern Warfare, and you still can get.
They did. I know they
COD
added
points.
some new guns and stuff to like the core multiplayer after that
That
wasn't tied
was
to.
forever ago.
Well, I'm just saying. Anyway, doesn't matter. But yeah, I noticed that either they just stopped rewarding it at all, or they were really spacing it out and making it more difficult. And that's another reason I stopped playing. Is that it's just like, oh, it's more obvious that you just want me to buy it now. When I would have been okay because you didn't have to put in all that much effort to unlock the next pass for free. Like it was shocking how little time you had to spend. I mean, it was a good grind, but it didn't get to the point. As someone who really enjoyed the game, it didn't felt like it was too much, you know. And as soon as they lost that balance, is kind of when I stopped because outside of the battle pass, there was really no way to get cosmetics for it, or at least interesting ones that all didn't look exactly the same. So
Yeah.
that was really disappointing as well.
It's also the battle passes in general just exhaust me usually. The only
Especially
ones,
in games that aren't free. Like
Yeah.
it's just
unless
I
they
try
are
to-
like the Master Chief Collections battle pass, where it's just a way to get extra rewards.
it's super relaxed, right? But if it's like your
There's like
your
no time to
typical-
it. It's just whatever you
if
want.
it's your typical like Fortnite or whatever battle pass in a paid game, I'm just like, there's no place for a battle pass in a paid, like especially a premium $60 to $70 game. It just shouldn't be there at all. Like, and again, unless it's, you know, more relaxed like MCC. But if it's more traditional, I just don't think it deserves to be there at all. Personally.
Yeah, I think that's very much a situation where like game design starts to get manipulative and be very, very money focused in a way that isn't good for games.
Yeah.
We're like, obviously we're all developers to some degree, and we all want games to succeed as an industry, but not at the expense of them being what we love. Like, you don't want to see games turn into a different thing for the sake of money, which is why like I think a lot of us can't do a lot of mobile games, because they tend to follow those same practices of having these like shady monetization tactics and whatnot. So I think stuff like that just tends to factor in super heavily to why a lot of games don't get played by a core gamer audience. Then again, there are tons of people that don't care about that. Like, there's tons of audience for those mobile games where you can spend tons of money from people that tend to not be traditional gamers and have like an disposable, a lot of disposable funding that they can just kind of toss at whatever they want. People that love those. So I'm not going to knock them for that, but I do think it is the kind of thing where you're not going to get that core gamer audience when you're doing those things. So yeah, I think that tends to be the biggest contributor to me not wanting to do something, is just if it feels shady, I don't want to do it.
If you can really feel the greed through all of their like monetized progression and stuff, like when it becomes really obvious, it becomes more difficult to enjoy the game, even if you do enjoy it. Because, like I said, I mean, Modern Warfare is like my favorite Call of Duty that I've played, and I just think the gunplay is great. I really like the map design, unlike literally everyone else. I just think it's great, and once I just saw the greed more visibly, I was like, yeah, I'm done.
It's also why I still think I'm pretty okay with MMOs asking for a subscription fee, if that means they don't do the shady stuff.
Mhm.
The problem now is that a lot of the MMOs asking for a subscription fee also do the shady stuff, which makes it even more like scummy. So
Does WoW still ask you for a subscription?
yes, yeah.
It's-
WoW
I feel
14
like
and
it's the
14
only-
are the two
Oh,
that have
they
subs.
both do. Okay. I
Yeah.
was gonna say I feel like WoW is the only major like MMO left because I know that
And Elder Scrolls is also kind of similar in that it's a pain to play without a sub.
but you can.
You can play without the sub. It's just like it is worse than the free trial of 14 if you do. Where you like your inventory is constantly filling up and you need to sell everything because you don't have any space for crafting materials. It's just stuff where it's like it's intentionally designed to be frustrating. If you don't
That's what
have a
I've
sub.
run into with ESO. Also, those like enchantment stone thingies that just weren't explained at all. That tutorial
yeah.
bits.
I think those were explained, but that was in an
Not
older
well.
version of the game before the starting zone was changed or something like that. It's that kind of thing where things, as time goes on, they kind of take it for granted that people will know what certain things are and not really tutorialize older mechanics and whatnot. Yeah, I think that certainly happened a lot with ESO. But yeah, it's stuff like WoW and 14 at least have avoided the loot box game, which is like the thing that I most dread when I'm playing an online game, especially one that I've paid for, is the loot box game. As soon as they add loot boxes, I'm out. I'm like hard out. It's that was a big reason why I stopped playing Overwatch eventually, was just the loot boxes were getting more and more absurd into like how many cosmetics they had and how much trash was put in them to make you not get those cosmetics. So I think that kind of thing just really compounds in multiplayer stuff, and that's like the thing with ESO that bothers me the most is the loot boxes in that game are egregious. They're really bad. Yeah, that's a big no from me. All right, anything else we want to cover? We've hit a lot of bases here. No, I do want to ask. We talked a lot about live service. Oh, Brett, go ahead.
This was the part 2 of the Tales of thing.
Eternia.
There's more to it.
Oh,
There's more. Well, because I started playing another one because I was 50 hours in to one of the ones that people who love those games claim to be the best. And I just, because as I knew the other one was the worst, and I just wanted to compare. And there was a lot of similarities that people probably would not like to admit that like those games. But I was, as far as I said I was, into Tales of Abyss, which is like that's like one of the ones that people who like the Tales series is like, oh my god, this is like my favorite game of all time. The characters, the story, the story. Oh, and I was like, I went in like, yeah, the characters, the story, I get it. No, they sucked, and I kept waiting for them to be like, yep. This is all the things that happened beforehand. They might have been a chore while it was going on, but it happened for good reason. And now we're trekking on with the good stuff. Now Tales of Abyss is happening, and I kept like, okay, well the gameplay's fun, but it never happened. So I stopped playing, and the characters just got really annoying, and stupid things kept happening. I want to. It's not really well, it didn't feel story important. So sorry, I guess. But this there was a specific instance where the whole thing is that cities and regions of the planet are like sinking into the crust.
The abyss, you could say.
The abyss.
Crunchy.
And you have to save the people in the city that's falling because you don't want people to die because 20 hours made you feel that way. And so you save the people, but like the classic crack between the earth happens or whatever, and there's like another group of civilians that like you can't get to, I guess, by jumping or whatever. No one has a spell that can float them over or something. And the way that these characters think is the idea to handle this is one of them goes, "That's right. Now, I know that I didn't tell any of you, including the player, that I had a passing interest in magical technology, but I suddenly do, just so that I can tell you that across the planet on a random island, they've been developing an airplane. What if we got that? and then you spend the next like 3 hours of game
What?
in like,
So
multiple in-canon days going across the ocean to get the airplane and rescuing the airplane's pilot and helping the other people, and then going, that city is still falling and those people probably still need help, so we should go back there and help them. And then you go back and you do it, and it was just such a strange turn of events, and things like
What?
that kept happening.
you
And I
can
was like,
press pause on gravity. That's
this
fine.
is
Wild.
this is narrative. This is called pacing, I think. So that's I guess the TLDR on that is that when I think there's like a counter in my brain that when I start playing a game that just unconsciously goes, the more affronts to God that happen in the writing, the more likely I am to not play anymore. Because there's just certain times, just like characters have just done things that are so stupid, or just like things in the story happen that are so like out of the blue and disagreeable that
What
I
has
just go like, what?
What has
I
happened to
got
my?
exactly.
Yeah, that's great. Tales of Abyss is one of the ones I played on my 3DS not even my 3DS, I think it was regular DS a long time ago, which I think is bad because I'm pretty sure that version of the game was like not good.
Yeah, that does. 3DS version doesn't sound like it would be good.
Because I thought it was like a 3DS only. That when I bought that game, I was like, I legitimately thought it was like a DS only game because it played pretty well, but I'm pretty sure looking back at it, it must have been completely different because there's no way that console could handle the full-blown Tales JRPG experience. So yeah, I am curious about it because Tales is a series I've kind of consistently played a decent amount of and then kind of bounced off and then gone back to the next one and played a little bit of that one and then I'm like okay, and then moved on. Because I missed a lot of them, but I think the two that I have like legitimately enjoyed are the Vesperia remake and the Berseria, one of the newer ones, as well as like I have Symphonia, which I keep hearing is incredible, but I just need to actually play it. Although I will say from Symphonia, the start of Symphonia does a lot of characterization in a way that I think Abyss didn't, from my memory of like it immediately establishes who your main characters are and like why you should care about them and what's going on and like why there are stakes to the story, which is an important thing in JRPGs, is establishing why you should, be interested in these characters and why what they're doing is important.
You think that sounds important? You
think like having a driving force in your narrative is important?
Huh,
I don't know.
I
gotta
never
save
thought
the
of that
people, but I
before.
gotta get an airplane first. I gotta get the world's first airplane to save these people that are on a different rock than the rock I'm on.
I can't explain why, but this makes me want to play Mother 3.
What are you talking about?
All right, and I think on that note, I want to go play Mother 3, which means we've hit about the end. That was the last point I wanted to hit on, is some stuff in single player games, because we talked a lot about live service. But I think with single player, it mostly is those like cosmetic things and narrative that tend to be the big halters of wanting to finish the game, as well as maybe just the only other thing I can really think of is like mechanics that don't evolve at all, of like the game just doesn't change at all over the course of like 30 hours or whatever. But playing a game like that is so rare that I don't even know if that's worth shouting out, because I can't recall the last time I had to quit a game because it didn't get different in like 50 hours of gameplay. So yeah,
You've heard our...
What did you say, Alex?
Oh, you've heard our demands, Naughty Dog. Clown wig for Ellie. 48 hours to comply.
Speaking of a clown wig for Ellie, shoutouts.
Good.
We do shoutouts in the show occasionally. All right, is everyone ready for shoutouts?
I am. I'm very ready.
Yes.
All right, well, Wyatt, you were super ready. You said you're very ready, which means you go first.
I'm incredibly ready. Yeah. Shout out to whatever team or just individuals that worked on the design for Valheim's base building, because it's awesome and it's probably one of like the best base building systems I've ever seen. It's so addicting. It's like half the game for me. It's so excellent.
Yep.
It's very good.
All right, Brett, you also said you were ready, so.
Shout out to Gundam Hathaway. Finally came out to American audiences on Netflix. It's probably I don't like CG animation very much. I'm a stingy old man. I like when it's on plastic and paper, but my God, is one of the most beautifully animated things I've ever seen in my life.
Dude, the trailer for it
that
looks
is-
so
that
good.
is-
I need to watch it.
Oh yeah,
What
it's a must
size?
watch.
What size of a series is it? Would you say it's
It's a
something
movie.
for?
It's an hour and a half.
I'm hearing a Goon Knight rep. I'm hearing a Goon Knight suggestion.
We'll keep
Perhaps.
going then. If that's your shout out, Brett. Alex, what do you have?
Yes.
Shout out to painkillers.
Just in general.
Right, great. Anything else?
Just in general.
Accidentally kicked a tree the other day.
Shout out to
They're
that
hel-
tree.
Oh.
They're helping me through some things.
Oh, my poor boy. All right. I have to give a shout out to. I played a little while ago. Of course, I was playing Final Fantasy XIV because that's what I do now.
You're the Final Fantasy 14 guy.
Look,
And what he wants other people to do.
There's a side quest where, hey, I haven't actually told any of you to play Final Fantasy XIV recently. You've just gotten this idea because it's a good game. But there was a side quest where it unlocks a cool dungeon you go through. At the end of the dungeon, you fight this cool turtle boss, and then you fight the boss. You beat the boss. You turn around, and all the bosses in the dungeon are now cute animals that come and cuddle with you. And it's the most adorable thing ever. But then it doesn't stop there, right? This is where Final Fantasy gets wild, because that was a side quest, right? It's one side quest, and then the lead animal goes up to you and goes like, "Yeah, so we're all like 1,000-year-old super powerful demigods, and we're starting to go crazy because we're super old and there's like negative energy. So we need you to like beat each of us in single combat, so that we don't implode into negative energy and like make the world destroy itself." And then I got to do this cool fight against a dragon tiger thing that turned into a hot boy, and then rammed in the air, slammed down, and there was this really cool bit where you had to like do classic dodging of falling objects in an MMO, and I lost my mind because I've never seen something like that before.
We get it. We should play the game.
Great.
I got it.
It was great.
I got it.
Shout out to the Byakuya boss fight in 14. All right.
Barack Obama?
Oh, God.
On that note, the outro is playing. Check the podcast out Tuesdays at 7 a.m. on your favorite podcast platform. That's it. Woo.
We made it.
We did it.
Somehow. It's a surprise that we get to the end every time.
Yeah. I never believe we will.
It's surprised that we get to the end and we don't have a frenemies style freak out live on air or something like that.